Go on, let's do a little bit of a controversial one then, will we? Let's look at those super villains in Star Trek who actually might have had a point. I'm Sean Ferrick for TrekCulture, and here are 10 Star Trek villains who were actually right. Number 10, Duros. No one's about to say that Duros was a likeable man. Not only did he orchestrate the wrongful accusation of Moog, and by extension his family, for the Romulan attack on Khitomer, but he also murdered Kalar to keep the secret. He also assassinated Kempek, but what Klingon hasn't murdered a superior in order to rise up the ranks? The questionable methods aside, Duros was attempting to seize power in the Klingon Empire while also keeping his family name clean. It must be remembered though that while Duros certainly employed Romulan techniques in his acts, the bomb on Kempek's ship, it was his sisters who openly allied with the Romulans by the time of the Civil War. Duros attempted to shift the blame to Moog's family to ensure that the House of Duros would rise to lead the Empire. From his point of view, the Empire had weakened itself by allying with the Federation and had strayed too far from the imperial efforts of times gone by. His dubious relationship with the Romulans aside, it could easily be argued that his attempt to rebuild the strength of the Empire suffered more from his methods than his goals. By the time of his death, he was merely a symptom of a much larger problem in the Empire. His efforts, however dire they might have been for Worf and Starfleet, could well have started the Empire on a journey back to its former fearsome strength, or, as Duros himself may have put it, he very nearly did make Kronos great again. Number 9. Sloan. Star Trek Deep Space Nine offered viewers a look at the darker side of the future, long before Discovery made that darkness a light shading. One of the more controversial additions to Star Trek was the character of Luther Sloan and the organization Section 31. They are the secret police of the Federation, operating from the earliest days, working outside any and all jurisdiction to ensure that paradise is kept idyllic. It is a somewhat sad moment when Sloan espouses the naivete of believing that he wouldn't exist. Sloan's actions, though perhaps unimaginable to some, prove that Section 31 needed to exist to protect Starfleet from the idealists. There are many arguments to be made about wanting to live in a world where Section 31 didn't have to exist, but that would still leave the Alpha and Beta quadrants under the watchful eyes of the Zhat Vash, the Tal Shiar, and the Obsidian Order. Sloan's efforts to put Koval in the Romulan Senate would prove to secure peace for further decades in the quadrant, something Starfleet secretly condoned. As Odo noted, it certainly was a tidy arrangement. Number 8. Tain. The fault, dear Tain, lies not in the stars, but in ourselves. Inabran Tain was the head of the Obsidian Order, the secret police of the Cardassian Union. Under his watch, the Cardassian military was kept in power, with a continuing lack of regard for any personal liberties. For decades, he led, though it was his overstepping that secured his downfall. The combined operation between the Order and the Tal Shiar, in an attempt to wipe out the Founders, proved to be the end of the Order at least, while the Tal Shiar would slink back into the shadows. The fallout, though, ironically, proved there was certainly a nugget of sense in his plan. Once the fleet was destroyed, the Cardassian military quickly lost control of the government, with the civilian Detapa Council taking over. This led to the Klingon invasion, as well as, eventually, Cardassia's alliance with the Dominion, ironically. One need hardly go into detail about what followed on from there. Tain's idea was certainly devastating, with a Machiavellian twist, but the long-term ramifications for the Alpha and Beta quadrants would only prove that, at least in theory, his idea might have been one of the better ones in the end. Number 7. Seska. For Seska, there is a simple question one must ask themselves. Do you see where she was coming from? Though Chakotay and Janeway weren't in the know, Seska was never a part of either of their crews. She was a deep-cover Cardassian agent, one who was assigned to trail the Maquis before the incident with the Caretaker. Becoming stranded in the Delta Quadrant, based on a decision made by a Starfleet captain no less, was certainly never in the plan. When discovered swapping secrets with the Kazon, she very pointedly makes the argument that were Voyager a Cardassian vessel, everyone would be home already, referring to Janeway's decision to destroy the Caretaker's array. From a purely factual standpoint, she is right. If one believes that the Okampa could well have taken care of themselves, then it only makes Seska's point more valid, something that even Janeway herself would start to thaw toward, particularly in the episode Night. No one is arguing that Seska was good by any means, but had she been in charge, everyone would have been home in time for dinner, and none of the crew who were lost during Voyager's 7-year mission would have died. Number 6. The Zindi. Now, hold on, don't think I'm about to condone the murder of 7 million people, alright? If you do think that, I obviously need to hide my evil a little bit better. No, this one comes from a place of understanding the Zindi's point of view. They were a disparate race who, over time, had finally managed to form an incredible alliance between their peoples. This, after the destruction of their homeworld, would seem to have been inconceivable at one point. They were then duped into believing that Earth would be responsible for another destruction. This, coming after so much sacrifice, pain and hard work, not to mention the question of their very survival, was easily something that needed to be stopped. The sphere builders manipulated them into the attack, and it was from a position of desperation that they began building their weapon. The very fact that most of them were able to listen to Archer and reason when the time came only solidifies the tragedy yet logic behind their position. To be fair, even we can't condone Commander Dolan. Guy was just a bit of a douchebag. Number 5. Rufo. Star Trek Insurrection is the next generation era film that's often overlooked. Both of its predecessors are stronger in terms of story and execution, while Nemesis is so often reviled that it earns discussion in that way. One of the greatest shames to come from this is the fading of F. Murray Abraham's Rufo. The Sona are a fascinating species. They, with the rest of the Baku, discovered the regenerative properties of the planet in the Briar Patch, but they were unwilling to sacrifice all technology to enjoy it. Rufo's plan was simple: ally with the Federation, thus giving them liberty to operate in their territory, then harvest the planet's radiation. While the impetus for this plan may have been Rufo's drive for revenge, the fact that it's the plan to use the radiation to help billions of people, particularly during the Dominion War, can't be overlooked. There were 600 Baku on the planet's surface. Patrick Stewart was quoted as saying that, were it his choice, he probably would have moved them. Rufo's methods were indefensible, of course, but his inspiration could have saved the lives of countless citizens. Number 4. Khan Into Darkness. Khan Noonien Singh, played by Benedict Cumberbatch in Star Trek Into Darkness, was a far cry from the obsessed maniac who stole the USS Reliant. This Khan, while still holding on to that tendency to dominate everyone, seemed to be far more pragmatic. He was discovered floating in deep space with the rest of his crew by Admiral Marcus. Revived, he was forced to work on a plan to build up Starfleet's armada, while also instigating Marcus's war with the Klingons. He was effectively woken from sleep and deposited into slavery. To make matters worse, Marcus ensured his compliance by threatening the lives of his entire crew, thereby forcing Khan into action. From Khan's point of view, attacking Starfleet headquarters made perfect sense, as it was they who attempted to subjugate him. He was then betrayed by Kirk while on board the Vengeance, before finally turning his full rage on Marcus. This Khan may have been a bit more brutal than the other iteration, but when one is pushed against the wall like that, there's certainly room for discussion on the topic. Number 3. The Diviner. Star Trek prodigy's Diviner, played by John Noble, had a simple mission to achieve: save his world's future by destroying Starfleet in the past. Solom was an isolationist world, so the idea of reaching out to the Federation was never an option, particularly when Solom faced so much destruction. The Diviner then travelled back in time to install the living construct aboard the Protostar, planning that when it came into contact with other vessels, it would spread a devastating virus, turning Starfleet ship against ship. The Diviner's failure, at least from Mother Vau N'Akat, was that he developed a conscience, thanks in no small part to his progeny, Gwyn. This allowed him to open his mind to the possibility of finding another way, rather than consigning an entire empire to destruction. He was unfortunately killed by Essentia before he could make any changes. Though his initial plan was horrific, he had been raised in a world that had always believed in keeping its borders closed. Starfleet showed up, and within 50 years, Solom was in ashes. It's hard to argue with that, or with the drive to want to prevent it either. Number 2. Commodore O. So, are we ever going to address those devastatingly destructive synthetic beings in the sky? No? Commodore O, perhaps the least popular Commodore in Starfleet history, was a Zhat Vash double agent, working from within Starfleet to destroy all synthetic life in the galaxy. She was almost entirely one-dimensional until one considers why she did what she did. Members of the Zhat Vash underwent the Admonition, which was effectively a story passed from member to member, heralding the destruction of all organic life in the universe at the hands of AI. There are probably more than a few writers and artists who are looking on this storyline a bit more kindly these days. The Admonition is so traumatic that people often do not survive, so knowing what O did, one can better understand her laser focus on her mission. There are of course bigger questions, like where was that Romulan fleet hiding, and have they all been vindicated when Soji opened the portal? The thing is, O was right. She was entirely wrong about how she went about it, and frankly, Mars wants a word, But Soji's actions prove that there truly was a devastatingly powerful enemy just waiting to come through and purge all organic life from the galaxy. In certain circles, O may be remembered as a great hero. Number 1. Admiral Pruman. Although never confirmed on screen, a bit of gentle retconning would place Pruman firmly in the camp of Section 31. His experiments aboard the USS Pegasus on interface cloaking technology could have saved countless lives as the years went on, but it was his methods once again that proved to be his undoing. Remember, this is a man who not only conducted experiments on board a ship that eventually mutinied against him, but also felt confident enough in what he was doing that he tried again years later. This is not a man who operates in isolation, and he clearly had the backing of some higher-ups in Starfleet. The biggest issue was the violation of the Treaty of Algernon. This agreement expressly forbade Starfleet from developing cloaking technology. The thing is, they already had it, or at least a version of it. Section 31 was in possession of cloaked ships in the 23rd century, so could this not simply have been seen as an amendment to the agreement? If we are harsh for a moment and say absolutely not, then look at what came of the experiments. Starfleet was locked into the treaty for the rest of the 24th century, even after the Romulan supernova a mere 2 decades later. This, combined with the fact that Romulans, Klingons, and several other empires utilised cloaks while Starfleet lagged behind, certainly adds a bit more sympathy to a retelling of Pruman's story. That's everything for our list. What do you reckon? Let us know in the comments below if you thought any of these actually deserve a second glance. Remember, we have a weekly podcast that drops every Tuesday, so make sure that you're signed up and subscribed to that. You could follow us over on Twitter at TrekCulture, we're on Instagram at TrekCultureYT, we're on Blue Sky at TrekCulture as well. I'm at Sean Ferrick on the various socials. You look after yourself until I'm talking to you again. Make sure that you live long and prosper, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and maybe give yourself the benefit of a second opinion sometimes. Thanks very much.